Welcome to another episode of the MMA Lockcast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, and your boy on Twitter at MMALOT. And this week we're going over UFC Fight Island 5, which is headlined by Corey Sandhagen and Magic Marlon Moraes in a pivotal bantamweight matchup. Very much looking forward to this fight. It should be high stakes in terms of, the winner coming out of this probably finds themselves in a number one contender fight, or, depending on what the hell happens with the bantamweight title, they could find themselves in a title fight. Who the fuck knows? For me, I think it should be the former. They should get at least one more fight, but this is a very, very pivotal fight, like I'm saying. Solid fights, otherwise. There's a couple other intriguing fights that people can say. Edson Barboza versus Makwan Amirkhani should be a barn burner. I'm very much looking forward to that fight. Ben Rothwell versus Marcin Tybura. Rothwell is always fun to watch. The UFC debut of Dricus du Plessis, who is the EFC welterweight and middleweight champion. So that should be interesting. Tom Aspinall makes his return. The UFC debut of Ilia Topuria, who is a guy I've been very, very high on since his Cage Warriors days. UFC debut of KB Bhullar, who also steps in to fight Tom Breese. Impa Kasanganay against Joaquin Buckley should be a great fight. Giga Chikadze versus Omar Moraes should be fireworks. And then even the UFC debut of Tagir Ulanbekov, who looks like he has a ton of potential, and makes sense why he's a minus 400. But yeah, I'm very, very much looking forward to this fight card. Man, I'm just glad there's a fucking fight every weekend. You know what I mean? With the 2-month layoff that we had because of COVID, and now we're just flying through these cards. I can't believe it's already October. I feel like we just broke down fights for July. You know what I mean? When I look back and I'm like, oh shit, I just watched this fight when I'm taping some of these guys and they just fucking fought in July. It's insane. I don't mind it. I like it. I love that we're getting fights every weekend. I'm looking forward to that break eventually, to not have to fucking, research 12 fights a week. But I'm slowly working my way to getting ahead of schedule as well. So hopefully we can get back to dropping podcasts for you guys on Mondays or even Tuesdays of fight week rather than Thursday, Friday, and unfortunately for that one day, Saturday. That will never happen again. We'll never drop another podcast again on Saturday. I promise you guys. All right, before we get into the breakdowns for the card, let's go over the last event, which was UFC Fight Island 4, which was headlined by Holly Holm versus Irene Aldana. Let's just start off with the main event, though, because I didn't have a bet on it, but I'm banging on myself for not pulling the trigger on Holly Holm. I pretty much called that fight to a T. You know what I mean? She almost got that finish in the 5th round, which is a little prop bet that I had as well. But she looked really, really good. Just another level when it comes to this striking game, especially with Holly Holm when she's fighting these other girls. I think it's like Jermaine Durandamy, Amanda Nunes, Holly Holm, then the rest of the division. It's pretty much that. You know what I mean? So solid win for Holly Holm there. Wish I pulled the trigger, but personally I was waiting for plus money. I thought we would get it with the amount of love that we were seeing on Irene Aldana, but we never ended up getting it, so I ended up passing. But I'm going to have to reconsider those types of situations again where I think that the skill discrepancy is huge. And, I can't base my decisions too much on line movement because I miss out on too many good opportunities. And obviously it comes back the other way too, but it is what it is. Anyway, let's get into the actual bet. So let's start off with the lock of the night play. I had minus 281 on Casey Kenny at 5 units. That cashes for plus 1.78 units. Shout out to everybody that got in on Casey Kenny nice and early. Minus 205. I saw a couple people get minus 225. And then we saw the line completely get steamed as the fight week or the fight day started getting closer and closer. I think it got up to like minus 350 at a certain point. So shout out to everybody that was able to get in on him early. But I knew as soon as that fight was announced, I wish I got in on it earlier, just being wrapped up with studying up on other fights. But yeah, I'm pretty certain as soon as that got announced, I was going to be like, all right, Casey Kenny's my lock of the night play for sure. And he went out there and put on a clinic on Haile Yalateng. I thought it was going to be more so of a grappling clinic from Casey Kenny, but he went out there and just ripped to the body time and time again, and Haile just had no answer for it. So he looked amazing in that fight, so I was happy to cash on that. Dog of the night play, we whiff 1.5 units at plus 130 on Juliana Pena. Jermaine Durandamy, nobody, I don't give a fuck what anybody says. Nobody called Jermaine Durandamy to win this fight via submission. No way. Zero. None. Also, Donnie, minus 350. Come on. hindsight is always 2020, but there is no way that Jermaine Durandamy deserved to be minus 350 here. Regardless, Juliana Pena was close to actually winning this via decision. Yeah, I mean, if she just kept Jermaine Durandamy on the cage there, or even if she got the takedown, she was winning that third round. So I don't mind the shot that I took out on Juliana Pena there, plus 130. It was a solid line in my opinion. I was going with the grappler, the decorated grappler, the proving grappler, and she was able to get it, really do solid work in that second round. And then the third round, obviously, we know what happened. Jermaine Durandamy notches her first ever submission victory. Fucking nuts. So L there, but we did also have a parlay 1.5 units at plus 150 at a parlay of Loma Lukbunmi, who looked amazing. She looked really, really good. It seemed like Jinyu Fry's game plan of pushing Loma up against the cage and kind of outpowering her there, that was thrown out the window pretty much nice and early, because we saw when they were clinching up, Loma was having a lot of success in the clinch, elbows, knees. Her Muay Thai is just ridiculous. So I'm looking forward to seeing her continuously get better. So I'm happy to hit that at minus 147. And then we had a minus 206 on the Daquan Townsend and Dushko Todorovic fight to go over 1.5. That hits with just like 45 seconds. Yeah, I mean, literally Todorovic gets him down, and then 45 seconds there, after hitting that over 1.5, he gets the finish. So I tweeted out after, I'm like, this is pretty much karma for when I bet and hammered the under 2.5 for Jillian Robertson and Courtney Casey. And, Robertson goes out there and gets the submission a minute after the under misses. So what goes around comes around. You know what I mean? So we cashed that plus 2.24 units on that parlay. At the end of the day, plus 2.52 units on the night. Very happy to come out on the winning side here. Hopefully this starts up another, solid stretch where we get the momentum back and we can get back on these winning ways. If you guys remember, my last streak was 9 straight events. I'm gunning for number 10. You know what I mean? I'm hoping we can get to 10 straight, but I got to be very calm, methodical about my approach for these upcoming cards. But there's a lot of good spots on these upcoming cards, not to mention the card that we have coming up this weekend. So, very much looking forward to that. Before we get into the breakdowns, once again, I just want to give a shout out to everybody on the Patreon. We set up the Discord channel, I believe it was a week or 2 weeks ago now, and it's been great. We have the live chat going on during the events, and then even just for the fuck of it, we just, it's easier than actually making posts on Patreon itself. If everybody on Patreon hops onto the Discord, it's much easier. It's a great community we have there. Everybody's calm, cool, respected, or respecting of each other, and we have a solid discourse in there. So I'm very happy that I set up the Discord. Hop on the Patreon if you haven't already. $5 a month. You guys get the early breakdowns. As you guys will see, everything's pre-recorded. So as soon as I record every single breakdown, I drop it on the Patreon ASAP. And then you guys also get a best bets and props article where I outline the best straight or total bet, and also the best prop bet for every single fight. So that's a nice little write-up I do after the weigh-ins every fight week, and then early breakdowns and every official pick, even when I'm charging the public. So $5 a month is nothing. You guys are helping me make this a full-time thing. I'm getting there, inching closer and closer. Every event, it's growing. I'm happy to be in the 3 digits of patrons. And it's just growing. I'm super psyched. I'm very, very happy with where the Patreon is going. So shout out to everybody on there, and shout out to anybody that's about to sign up. I appreciate it. The link is in the description below. Make sure you guys click that and check that out. All right. That should be it. Let's get into the breakdowns for UFC Fight Island 5. Bruno Silva versus Tagir Ulanbekov. We got minus 400 for Tagir and plus 325 for Bruno Silva. Let's start off with Bruno Silva, who's had 2 fights in the UFC so far, and he has gone without a win that entire time. So he lost his first fight in the UFC to Khalid Taha via 3rd round submission, and then the David Dvorak fight he lost via decision. Did I say 3rd round? I should have said 3rd round submission for the Khalid Taha fight, but I might have fucked it up. Regardless, this is a fight that I'm intrigued by, because a lot of people keep saying that the strong points of Bruno Silva's game is his jiu-jitsu, but everything I've seen on tape up until this point leads me to believe that there really isn't much of a jiu-jitsu game there. He may be a black belt or whatever people are calling him, but we don't see much of it in his fights. the David Dvorak fight. He gets him down, doesn't really get to do much damage from on top. Gets his back at a certain point and doesn't really do a good job of securing the back either. It's small things that make me kind of question the validity of how effective his MMA jiu-jitsu is. You know what I mean? He has 3 submission victories out of 10 total wins, and he's gotten submitted once, and that was obviously by Khalid Taha. And it's also something that you see a lot in his fights where he kind of just gives up the third round. You know what I mean? Sometimes he either gets finished in the third round or he just, he's always rocked or hurt. The Casey Kenny fight, he was hurt there. David Dvorak was really, letting go on him in that third round as well. And that's not a very good sign for somebody that you want to be backing. He has solid hands. He's a decent fighter, but the thing is, he doesn't really have that next gear to get to that next step. And I truly think that's where his shortcomings are going to come, especially against a guy like Tagir Ulanbekov, who seems to have a very, very high ceiling. With Tagir Ulanbekov, we're talking about a guy who's pretty much been training side by side with Khabib Nurmagomedov for a long time. He's a part of that Dagestani crew. He trains under, or he used to train under the father of Khabib Nurmagomedov, which is why you guys remember he was actually supposed to fight Alexander Doskolchuk back in July, and then he pulled out of that fight just out of respect for Khabib's father. He took some time off to grieve with the family and all that stuff. But now he's back, and I believe Zubair Tukhugov was the first fighter to truly fight in the UFC after the passing of Abdul Manap. I want to give it a try. I wanted to try his name. But I believe that was the first time somebody fought. And they came up on the short end, but I think Tagir is the guy that's truly on the next level, though. I think he's going to have a much higher ceiling than Tukhugov. He has a ton more talent. He's 28 years old. He has a solid frame for this flyweight division. He's a tall dude, 5'7". Bruno Silva's 5'4", and it usually shows in his fights too. He's always the one going out there and kind of just outstriking his opponent from range. I wish he'd add a little bit more pop on his shots because that would make him a lot more dangerous on the feet, in my opinion. But he's still efficient enough on the feet to not really get blown out. But the best of his work really comes on the ground, where he's able to just ragdoll opponents, get them on the ground, and just control them from on top. I don't think anything Bruno Silva is going to be throwing at him is nothing that Tagir has actually seen in the past. So I don't think he has too much to worry about there. But I'm intrigued to see what kind of route we see Tagir take in this. Is he going to go out there and just wrestle fuck Bruno Silva and just smash him from on top? Or is he going to just take the safe route? And, I guess the safer route would be to get the takedowns because, again, Bruno Silva probably isn't the most, or is definitely not the most aggressive black belt or anything that we've really seen. I'd like to see a little bit more off of Bruno Silva's back, and we might be able to see that here. But truly, what I believe the best game plan for Tagir in this fight is to, that first round, let's box him up on the feet. Let's use our reach. Let's use our length, and let's really try to implement the striking game. And then in that second and third round, let's start to take him down. Let's try to smash him with elbows, even if it's just from full guard. Just do work from up there. But I truly think that Tagir Ulanbekov is going to be a top 5 flyweight in the next year or two. Just give the guys some more activity, give the guy a little bit of time. But he's there. He's 28 years old. He's been a pro since 2013. Did have about a 2-year layoff, before he had his second fight. But he's been fighting guys with solid records throughout his career. We know a lot of guys on these Russian scenes have solid regional experience because they don't really get coddled as much as some of these North American fighters that kind of just get to pad their record a bit, and then when they come to the UFC, they just fall on their ass. Russia, they know how to groom these fighters correctly, and they give them the necessary opponents and experience that's required before they get to these big stages. Like, he's fighting guys that are 8-1, 4-0, 9-2, 20-7 in his 7th fight. You know what I mean? Goes out there and beats Zalgas Zumagulov. Let's not get that mistaken. It's a loss on his record, but if you guys truly watch that fight, that was a 5-round fight in Kazakhstan. So there's probably a little bit of hometown cooking there, but there's absolutely no way you can say that Ulanbekov lost that fight. So in my opinion, I believe he's still an undefeated fighter. He should be 13-0 at this point in time, and he should have already been in the UFC. If anything, he should have been in the UFC before Zalgas. But Yeah, he's a solid fighter. He even after that loss to Zumagulov, he goes out there and gets 3 straight victories, 1 decision and 2 submission victories. But the kid's a problem. Yeah, I mean, again, with his frame, he uses it quite well. He has a good understanding of his range at the in the striking realm. Haven't really seen him in too much trouble in any of his fights, and I don't think that Bruno Silva is going to be the one to get him into trouble either. So I truly like Ulanbekov here. I completely understand why he's like minus 400. He might even get up to minus 500 come fight time, but solid parlay piece in my opinion. Yeah, it's going to be a while till we see Ulanbekov, anything better than minus 300. The kid's a beast, and he's going to take this flyweight division by storm, in my opinion. So I really like Tagir in this spot. I think he's going to get it done via decision or maybe a 3rd round finish. Again, we've seen Bruno Silva fade late in fights. Either it's a gas tank issue or it's just a sustainability issue. I don't know what it is, but Bruno Silva just has too many issues when it comes late into the fight. And I've never seen Tagir Ulanbekov really slow down either. He won a solid 5 rounds with Zalal Zumagulov, and all of his decision victories, we've seen him keep up that pace from minute 1 all the way to minute 25 or minute 15. So I expect the same thing here, but I could see him breaking Bruno Silva late as well. So I'm going to take Tagir Ulanbekov to win this fight via 3rd round TKO. Tracy Cortez versus Stephanie Egger. We got minus 185 on Cortez and plus 160 on Egger. Let's start off with Tracy Cortez. She's 7-1. Her only loss is coming in her first ever fight where she lost via guillotine choke, and since then she's been able to put a couple good opponents on her record. Most recently, her last Invicta fight against Erin Blanchfield, she won a split decision in that very, very close fight. Maria Agapova, she beat her by decision on the Contender Series, which earned her a UFC contract, and then she steps in and fights Vanessa Mello and beats her via unanimous decision in a fight where, she showed off her grappling and she showed off decent hands, but she seemed definitely undersized for that weight class. She's not. She should be a 125er. She could even be a 115er, to be honest. But she went up to 135 to fight Vanessa Mello, and she came out on the losing end. She came out on the winning end. I think it's going to catch up to her, and this could potentially be the fight that it catches up to her against Stephanie Egger. One thing that Cortez does is she really relies on her grappling. She tries to grind out her opponents. A lot of her game plan revolves around getting the takedown and holding that top pressure and just landing enough shots to stay on the feet, or stay on the ground. Her striking looks okay. It still could use a little bit of work. But again, I think her size is just going to eventually become a disadvantage, especially here at the 135-pound division. I was kind of surprised to see that she actually went up to 135, especially in her last fight. I tried looking into the reasoning as to why, and the only reasoning I could find as to why she took the Mello fight was because she wanted to get in a fight before the end of the calendar year in 2019 after she earned her contract on the Contender Series in July. So she steps in, she fights Vanessa Mello in November, and then I was assuming that she'd go back down to 135, or 125, but here she is, just over a year, or just under a year later, still going up to 135. She was supposed to fight Bea Malecki last time around, before Malecki pulled out, and in Stephanie Egger, who's a UFC newcomer herself. She's known to be a judo black belt. She did compete against Ronda Rousey in the Olympics. They had 2 meetings. They split the meetings, but she does have a ton of potential to fulfill if she actually wants to make some noise. She's 32 years old, so if anything, she's going to have to get it done now. If anything, her most recent fight was actually September 5th, where she got a rear naked choke over Sinja Kiefer. See, the weird thing about this, we have a couple of fights on her. We have the Alexa Connors fight where we saw, she looked very uncomfortable in the striking realm. Alexa Connors, anytime she threw a combination, she was able to back up Egger up against the cage, and she seemed, to really seem flustered there. She lost a split decision there. And then we get the Eva Siskonen fight. The one thing to note here, though, is that fight and her most recent fight against Kiefer were both for Buddy MMA Clash, which is a promotion over there, I believe, in, where is that? Switzerland. Note that Stephanie Egger's gym is Buddy MMA. So pretty much this entire promotion is made to make their fighters look good. You know what I mean? Eva Siskonen was 5-4-2 going into that fight, and then Sinya Kiefer was 4-4 going into that fight. So a little bit of record padding, if you guys want to say, but then again, I'm not sure the amount of women that are actually out there that can actually compete, at this level. So I'll give her a little bit of a pass. Her fight against Reina Mura, or King Reina, if you guys want to call her that, from Risen, that's probably her most. That's probably her most legitimate win. You know what I mean? Reina is a solid opponent. She went into that fight with an 11-2 record. She had solid grappling herself too, but Stephanie Egger was able to go in there and round after round get this fight to the ground and control her. You would get her back pretty much every single time. Sorry. And she was able to do enough control. And she wasn't able to get the finish, but she was able to control the vast majority of that fight. So here she comes up against Tracy Cortez in a fight where I think it's actually going to play out in the grappling realm. But I got to give the slight edge to Egger. She's 5'8". Tracy Cortez is 5'5". Stephanie Egger just physically, she looks much stronger, in much better shape when it comes to strength than Tracy Cortez. So I think it's going to be a little bit tough for Cortez to get this fight to the ground, and especially when she, clinches up in those positions, I think she's going to find it harder to get Stephanie Egger down than she would expect. I wouldn't even be surprised to see Egger pull out her judo and reverse some of these clinch positions and get a takedown of her own. And then when it gets to the ground, I truly think that Egger is going to be the stronger woman. And even if she's on her back, I think she'll find a way to get a sweep and reverse positions. I think Tracy Cortez is just good enough to grapple fuck some of these women. But when she goes up against a girl like Stephanie Egger, I think she's going to have a little bit of trouble. I want to see the improvements on the feet from Stephanie Egger, so I think I'll give the slight advantage there to Tracy Cortez, but not by a wide margin. But I truly think this is going to come down to something as simple as size and strength. The one sketchy thing about Stephanie Egger is obviously her gas tank. When fights do go late, we do see a little bit of gassing from her. She's a big girl. She doesn't really seem to know how to properly or efficiently regulate her gas tank, but I think she would do well enough in the first 2 rounds, the first 10 minutes, to be able to eke out those 2 rounds and then survive the 3rd round, because Cortez is no crazy finisher or anything like that. So I think she'll be able to survive that 3rd round if her gas tank really does fail her, and I think she could pull out a decision. There is a potential for her to get a submission earlier in this fight, but I truly think it's going to come down to her just kind of grapple fucking Tracy Cortez, landing good shots from on top, maybe threatening with a couple of submissions but giving up on them. I could absolutely see a possibility of a Stephanie Egger submission early. Otherwise, I think she just grinds this fight out. I'm kind of banging on myself for not getting on this tape a little bit earlier, because she was roughly around that plus 225 range, and now she's all the way down to plus 160. So a lot of people are doing their tape studying, and they're seeing that Egger definitely has some value here. I'm going to wait it out. I'm going to see if there's going to be a little bit more Tracy Cortez money coming back in as the fight week gets longer. And maybe I'm going to cross my fingers that we get Stephanie Egger at plus 200 again. It's tough for me to back Stephanie Egger to completely, because I still need to see more from her. The lack of competition that she faced on the regional scene, that's a little bit of a concern too. And then obviously her gas tank is a concern. What if she fucking gasses out 7 minutes into the fight, and then the last 3 minutes of the 2nd round and the entire 3rd round is Tracy Cortez's? So that's something to be skeptical and worry about as well too, because Cortez would definitely have the cardio advantage here. But again, I truly think it's going to come down to something as simple as the size and strength of Stephanie Egger here. So I do like Egger here. I think she's going to be much better on the ground, at least for those first 10 minutes. And then after that, Cortez can take over. But as long as there's no 10-8 round or anything like that, I think Stephanie Egger will be safe here for a decision victory. So I'm going to go with Stephanie Egger to win this fight via decision. Giga Chikadze versus Omar Moraes. We got minus 145 on Omar and plus 125 on Giga. The under 2.5 is at plus 180, which I find a little bit interesting here. So let's start off with Giga Chikadze. He's coming off a victory over Erwin Rivera. That was back in May. That was during their first little COVID stretch. where they had like 3 events back to back to back. But yeah, he stepped in and he was supposed to fight Mike Davis that night. Fortunately, Mike Davis got hurt and stepped short Norris Irwin Rivera at a weight class above that he's used to fighting at. And it obviously showed. Giga Chikadze, 6 foot at 145 pounds, is a taller featherweight. So obviously it showed in that fight with Irwin Rivera. Was giving up a ton of size. Giga did a solid job of keeping Irwin Rivera on the end of his punches and of his kicks. Anytime Irwin Rivera would try to crash forward with any big strikes, he'd either eat a knee up the middle or just a nice 1-2 down the pipe. And it shows the type of striking that Giga definitely had in that fight. Even in the Brandon Davis fight, that was a split decision, but he showed solid skills all around. And then the Jamal Emmers fight, a lot of people are saying that Emmers pretty much gave away that fight by not, implementing the grappling sooner, and he allowed Giga Chikadze to really get ahead with the striking. So what we get with Giga Chikadze is a solid kickboxer. He has glory, experience as well, fighting over there for their kickboxing promotion. But what he shows also is kind of like a karate style too, which is kind of interesting. Like he stands sideways, he has that low hand stance, bouncing stance, and then he likes to crash forward every now and then and throw a couple of strikes and then pivot out and get out of the way. A couple solid kicks as well from that stance. He seems to be a little bit of a point fighter, but mainly a striker. And we have seen a little bit of grappling from him and even grappling defense, as well as a reversal on Jamal Emmers, which was very, very impressive. But he seems to be rounding out his MMA game, especially training over there at King's MMA when he has training partners like guys to the level of Beneil Dariush, who he seems to be quite close with. So that's very, very, reassuring if you're a Giga Chikadze backer. Omar Moraes, on the other hand, trains over there at Hard Knocks 365, or they call it Sanford MMA now, which is headed by Henry Hooft. Solid striker, a Venezuelan guy that now finds himself in that Florida region. He's undefeated, 10-0 now. He's going in there. Last time around, he beat Gabriel Benitez by decision. Before that, Lil Dong, I should call him. He was actually scheduled to fight Alexander Hernandez at a certain point, and that would have been a great way to find out where Omar Moraes is really at. But here he draws Giga Chikadze, and this should be a fun striking battle. Anytime you get a striking battle of this, type where both guys are seeming to have a ton of power in their hands, it's interesting that the under 2.5 is plus 180. Yeah, they've both gone to decisions a couple times over the last couple fights, but I still believe that both of them have power in their hands, and we could absolutely see one of them land a bomb here and really finish the fight. I lean a little bit more so to the Omar Moraes side. I feel like he doesn't mind walking through the fire a little bit more than Giga, and that will allow him to have a little bit more output. And I think he can land hard enough on a Giga Chikadze to, really change the fight. Again, trading with a guy like Henry Hooft, Henry Hooft has seen it all. So for him to match up against a guy like Giga Chikadze, it's solid for Omar Moraes to really know, okay, these are the ins and outs of being able to beat somebody like this. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a leg kick heavy attack from Omar Moraes, especially with that wide karate stance that Giga Chikadze brings to most of his fights. The guy has a solid leg kick, but the most of his damage is done by his hands. So I really expect him to, kick the leg nice and early and then slowly open up his hands as the fight progresses. The interesting caveat to this fight is this will be the first time down to 145 for Omar Moraes in the UFC, and I believe in his career period. This is actually the first time he's gone down to 145. So he has a very built and sculpted figure already, so I'm interested to see how he looks like coming down to 145. It's almost like Edson Barboza going from 155 to 145, and he's done it, and he looked good last time around too, so I'm expecting kind of the same thing from Omar Moraes. But it does give a little bit of pause when you're thinking about a guy that is not used to fighting 15 minutes and exerting as much energy as he normally does. on first thought, like before going into this, I'm like, all right, Omar Morales, no bones about it. I really expect him to go out there and get this W. But the more you look at Giga Chikadze as well, he has such an intriguing style with that karate stance that he brings, his in and out movement, his ability to manage distance, his kicks, his kickboxing background. I think he's like 36-6 or something like that. Crazy amount of experience in that kickboxing realm. But obviously the MMA realm is completely different. We haven't seen too much in terms of the grappling from Omar Morales. We know that he likes to go out there and just try to land a bomb and try to really hurt his opponents in that fashion. But when he's going up against a guy like Giga Chikadze, who seems so one-dimensional with the striking and is mainly just a striker, you wonder if Omar Morales is going to go out there and try to change his game plan and try to go for takedowns or try to clinch up or do something like that. So I have a little bit more questions in this fight as compared to most people who seem very set on Omar Morales here, even though the line is starting to close. But I do like Omar. I think it's going to be his output that ends up winning him this fight. Overall fight IQ, I just think he's a better fighter than Giga, and it's about time that Giga takes that L because a lot of people are going in there and continuously fading him, and unfortunately coming up on the short end pretty much every single time. So I think this will be the first time we see Giga take that L in the cage, at least in the UFC, and it's going to come by. I don't know what method I think we're going to get Omar here. Like I said, I like the under 2.5 at plus 180, but I could also see this being like a little bit of a hesitant fight where both guys are just hitting each other at the end of their punches and not really landing that bomb. You know what I mean? So, you know what? I'll go with Omar Morales to win this fight via decision. I hope he goes with the leg kicks early and often, which will allow him to open up his hands. And then if we see some grappling from him, I wouldn't be too mad either. But this might be a fight that I kind of stay away from. It is closer than I believe most people think it is, just due to the background and the experience of Giga Chikadze in that stand-up realm. And again, the lack of what we've seen from Omar Morales when it comes to the grappling, as I believe that would be the safer path to victory if that's a skill that he actually has. So once again, I'll go with Omar Morales to win this fight via decision. And yeah, the line is accurate in my opinion. But yeah, I still do like Omar Morales here once again to win via decision. Ali Alqaisi versus Tony Kelley. We got minus 230 on Tony Kelley and plus 190 on Ali Alqaisi. Let's start off with Alqaisi. He's 8-4 coming into this fight off of a loss in his UFC debut against Erwin Rivera. It was a split decision loss, but I do think that Erwin Rivera just slightly edged that fight out. But it did show us a lot of things that could come into play in this fight against Tony Kelley. So what we have seen from Alqaisi in previous fights is something that he likes to do is really jump for guillotines. He has a really mean grip. He has caught several fighters in that submission, but it seems like his go-to is kind of like the ground game. He likes to take guys down and tries to control them there. He has decent hands, but I think that his best work is really done on the ground. He did clip Rivera a couple times, but nothing significant, and he was the one kind of getting lit up on the feet when it really was in the striking realm. Rivera just seemed a little bit too quick for him, and it seemed to be the detriment to Alqaisi in that fight. I'm stumped on this guy. You know what I mean? I want to see how much how much he's actually able to like control guys on the ground. The last two Brave fights that he had, we don't have access to those. But the fight where he got an armbar in Jurasdia. That was a guillotine choke. So pretty much all the only fights that we have footage of him pre-UFC are the ones that he got like a guillotine choke for. But I truly want to see what his top game is like because I feel like if his grappling is up to par, he could potentially give Tony Kelley some issues here. Tony Kelley, on the other hand, he's coming off a fight of the night performance against Kai Kamaka, I should say. And that was a fight where these guys were going to war. Tony Kelley started off hot, then Kai Kamaka started to come on with some beautiful body shots, and then they were just going back and forth pretty much the entire fight. But Kai Kamaka comes out on the winning end. Very, very entertaining fight and showed us a lot about Tony Kelley as well. The guy's gritty as hell. The guy's tough as hell. Very, very durable. One thing that I wanted to give him a shout out for is the fact that he fought fought Kevin Aguilar with five professional fights. He was 5-0 at the time. Went up against Kevin Aguilar, who was 10-1 at the time, and he went to a 5-round split decision with Kevin Aguilar, who soon after that hopped over to the UFC. Kelley, very, very talented. I mean, I love what I see on the feet from him. Solid footwork, solid kicks, solid hands. And he uses his range pretty well too. He's gonna have an advantage here in terms of size as well over Alqaisi. He's 5'9" with the 70-inch reach, whereas Alqaisi is 5'6" with the 68-inch reach. So I'm pretty sure that we'll see Tony Kelley pretty much try to keep this fight at distance as much as possible, using his footwork to get in and out with strikes. Using that front teep to keep Alqaisi on the outside, and then coming down the middle with the 1-2. I love what he brings to the table in terms of the striking realm. My only concern is, one, this is going to be his first fight down at bantamweight, so that's one thing that you need to keep in mind. He's going to be cutting weight. He's going to be dropping down for the first time to 135 pounds. Two, what if Alqaisi goes out there and tries to take a grapple-heavy approach where he just pushes him up against the cage and he kind of just controls him? I have seen Kelley getting taken down a couple times, and that's absolutely a possibility here with Alqaisi, possibly going for the takedowns and trying to grind this fight out. Kelley, decent off of his back. He is offensive, so I don't think that Alqaisi, if he does get him down, will be able to stay, too comfortable on top. He's going to have to continue to work, look to pass, or at least look to, stay active with landing some damage. But I don't know why. I just have a little bit of a weird feeling about this fight. Kind of like how I had a weird feeling about the Charles Jourdain fight last weekend. A lot of fighters a lot of people got bailed out with the draw. I still haven't gone back to watch that fight again. So, there's that. It could possibly score for Jourdain, but you guys are here for the Alqaisi and Kelley fight. So yeah, I'm a little bit skeptical. Minus 230 is a little bit too much for me when it comes to Tony Kelley. If I was getting closer to minus 170, minus 160, maybe that's something that I consider. But even in parlaying him, I'm not sure. Maybe on my Hail Mary or my lottery parlay, I'll throw him in there or something like that. But as an actual bet, man, like, he should spark Ilia Alqaisi on the feet. Don't get me wrong, but it's when the clinch situations start to happen, and we really see, Alqaisi possibly push him up against the cage and try to slow him down. If Alqaisi tries to go out there and go strike for him, he's gonna get boxed up. He's gonna eat it for sure. But I do like Kelley here. There's a little bit of skepticism on my end about the type of fighter that we'll see. Still kind of young in his MMA career. When it comes to age, he's 33, so he's really going to have to start coming into his own. But yeah, that was a lot of damage he took against Kai Kamaka back in August 15th. So we're talking about just under 2 months ago there. He took all that damage against Kai Kamaka, and now here he is once again against Ilia Alqaisi. So something that you need to keep in mind. And again, he's cutting weight, dropping another 10 pounds to get down to 135. So you got to think that could possibly have an effect on him. However, when it comes to a final prediction, I'm actually going to be going with Tony Kelley to win this fight via decision. I think he just picks apart Alqaisi from distance, and is able to keep his distance enough to be able to, implement his game plan without getting totally controlled, totally taken down, and hurt from Alqaisi, or even a submission from Alqaisi. So I like Kelley to win this fight via decision. Impa Kasanganay versus Joaquin Buckley. We got minus 255 on Kasanganay and plus 215 on Buckley. Let's start off with Joaquin Buckley, who made his UFC debut on pretty short notice after Kevin Holland was supposed to fight Trevin Giles, or Giles. I keep forgetting if it's a G or a G, whatever. Either way, Kevin Holland was supposed to fight Trevin, and Trevin obviously, had his issues before the fight. Literally right before they were supposed to walk out, and Kevin Holland unfortunately did not get to fight that night. The UFC did a good job in finding him a replacement, especially somebody as fresh as Joaquin Buckley, who had fought the week before that against Jackie Gosh, a fight where he was able to avenge a loss earlier in his career. He got it done via KO in the second round. That was a fight where it just looked like Gosh gave up in that second round. There's something wrong with his foot, and he pretty much just gave into it. And Joaquin Buckley was able to unload on him, land a beautiful shot, and pretty much face planted Gosh. And he was able to get the call up pretty quickly there. So, good win for him there. I'm still skeptical about the level of this guy's skills. I don't think he's really up there. I think he's one of those guys that just kind of relies on his power a little bit too much, tries to, just blitz forward every now and then, throw up a bunch of shots, hoping to land a significant enough one that will either rock his opponent or drop his opponent. But I think when he fights guys, especially like Impa, he's going to be in for a rude awakening in terms of just guys that are, technically a little bit more sound, a little bit more efficient with their movements, and just overall better fighters. Joaquin Buckley does have a little bit of experience in the wrestling realm, but it doesn't seem like something that he leans on a little bit or leans on enough at all. I feel like if he added that a little bit more to his game, it would allow for his hands to open up a little bit more. Feinting for takedowns, letting opponents kind of fall for the fake, and then come up with punches and really showcase his striking. But we just don't see that from him. Obviously, the Kevin Holland fight was a hard fight for him in terms of, Kevin Holland had such long range, uses his kicks very well, obviously very experienced in the UFC cage, and then obviously, quite short notice. And it was short notice for both of them. If anything, Joaquin Buckley had it a little bit more difficult because he actually fought 2 weeks before. But then he steps in and fights, a week before, and then he steps in and fights Kevin Holland, a completely different style than what he was preparing for with Jackie Gosh. And then Kevin Holland, we know he can be a thorn in the side of a lot of people when he has that size advantage, that reach advantage, that length advantage, where he's able to just continuously kick you from the outside, kind of, really stunt your forward pressure. And we saw that pretty much throughout that entire fight. And then Kevin Holland was finally able to put him out in that third round with a pistol of a right hand. And we saw him be successful with that in that first round too. And that seems to be the kryptonite of Buckley. You know what I mean? Like very efficient, methodical strikers. And that's what I'm slowly starting to get from Impa Kasanganay. It was really tough for me to get a read on this guy from his Contender Series days to even the Maki Pitolo fight. But as you start to study the guy's game a little bit more, you see what he's kind of doing. And at first, it seems like a little bit of low output, but when he really starts to put on his opponents and really starts to stifle them, it makes sense. You know what I mean? Going into this, I thought like the potential low output of Impa Kasanganay would, give a little bit more edge for Joaquin Buckley to kind of edge this out if this goes to a decision, just with his blitz attacks, but. But Kasanganay, again, he's kind of a sniper like Kevin Holland. He uses his length and his reach very well. Obviously, he's not going to have as significant of a reach and a height advantage as Kevin Holland did over Buckley, but he still has that, the understanding of how to use that range, how to use his striking, how to use his jab and his lead hand especially to really gauge the distance between him and his opponent, and then make them pay whenever they get a little bit too close. He's one of the few fighters that it kind of surprised me at how lethal he's allowed his lead hand to be. A lot of people think that the rear hand is the one that really generates the most power and is always the kill shot that a lot of fighters look for. But Impa Kasanganay has done a great job with masking that lead hand, that left hand. Whether it's a double jab or whether it's a jab followed by a hook, he does such good work with that left hand. And it kind of catches his opponents off guard. These guys are thinking that there's a jab coming, then he's able to just bypass their guard and hit them with a beautiful hook. One of his favorite combinations is the right to the body and follow with the left to the head. And I think that's a great combination too, especially in this matchup against Buckley, who has a little bit of a higher of a guard whenever he's striking. Speaking of guards with Impa Kasanganay, something that we saw Maki Pitolo with a little bit success in their fight was with the high guard of Impa Kasanganay. When he does decide to really, cover up and shell up, he leaves. He goes he moves down, like he crouches a little bit too much, and that might be something that Buckley could kind of. Hopefully catch on to and then maybe land an uppercut of some sort. And we know he has power, but I'm a little bit skeptical in terms of how devastating his power was. I'm not super impressed with his finish over Jackie Gosh. That guy gave up. The guy was 11 years older than him too. Let's not forget that. But that guy pretty much gave up, was just a punching bag at that point, and Buckley was able to get him out of there. But even his earlier wins, I mean, I'm not super impressed by it. I think that Impa Kasanganay is way more of an efficient striker, a better methodical fighter, and I like that we could see the grappling from him as well. We did see that in his Contender Series fight against Anthony Adams, where he was able to switch it up and really catch Adams off guard and really get a takedown and do some damage from on top. And I think he's able to. He should be able to do that with Buckley too. And Buckley does have a little bit of a wrestling background, but not the greatest. And we have seen him taken down in some of these fights. So I think if Impa can, kind of lull him into thinking that this is going to be a striking fight, and then in that second round go for a takedown and try to switch it up, I think it could be very, very helpful for him. But even if this fight stays on the feet for the majority of it, I think that we'll see Impa Kasanganay just use that left hand to perfection, try to throw off Buckley, obviously throw a couple front kicks up the middle here and there. But I think it's really going to frustrate Joaquin Buckley when he's not able to land perfectly enough on Impa to, rock him, drop him, and, sway the judges. Because I think the Impa he's durable. Obviously, he's undefeated still. He hasn't been finished or stopped or anything like that. And I don't think that Joaquin Buckley is the guy that's going to go out there and do it. Minus 255, there's a lot of respect coming in on Impa. I'm surprised that he was only minus 135 against Patolo, and now here he is against Joaquin Buckley. Yeah, Buckley got put out in his last fight, but it was against Kevin Holland. That's not a world beater by any sorts, but a lot of people are valuing Impa at a high level now based off of both their most recent performances. I do agree that Impa should win. I do think he's the better fighter here. There is that potential of Joaquin potentially landing on him. Patolo did land a couple times on him, but not to the extent of hurting, wobbling, or dropping him. But maybe Joaquin Buckley could be that guy to do it. But I just see Impa being a little bit too efficient. I see, carrying the range well with his kicks, using that left hand to perfection, like I said. Combinations. Getting out of the way of the big shots of Buckley. I think he should have studied him enough to, kind of prepare himself for his blitz attacks and counter accordingly. He's a decent counter striker as well, too. So I like Impa here. I think he's going to win by decision. I think it's just going to be a calm, methodical approach, nothing overbearing or overwhelming that will really overextend him to, potentially get knocked out. And I'd be happy to see him, mix in a couple of takedowns there, because I think that would really keep Buckley on the edge. We have seen Buckley kind of slow down later in fights too, so that's something that Impa should be able to take advantage of. And then I think after that, 1.5 round mark, we'll really see the punching power of Joaquin Buckley take a little bit of a dive, and that's where Impa should be able to really be confident in his striking, really be confident in the striking realm, and really put it on Buckley. So I don't think we'll see a finish here. I do think it's going to be Impa by decision. And I'd look forward to continuing to see how he progresses as a fighter, because he has a ton of potential. He's a calm, methodical fighter. I think he has solid fight IQ as well, too. And, that alone should be enough to will him to a victory here against Joaquin Buckley via decision. Chris Daukaus versus Rodrigo Nascimento. We got minus 260 on Nascimento and plus 220 on Chris Daukaus. Let's start off with Rodrigo Nascimento. He's coming off a victory over Dontel Mays, where he was able to get a rear naked choke halfway through the second round. In that first round, the dude was throwing bombs. He knew that it was he'd had to play on that in the striking game a little bit before he could decide to take this fight to the ground. And even when he did decide to take it to the ground, it was a little bit of a battle up against the cage, where Dontel Mays was actually putting up a bit of a fight, even reversed him a couple times up against the cage, but eventually Nascimento was able to get him down, wasn't able to get the finish in the first round, but it did eventually come in the second round after Mays gave up his back, and we got a rear naked choke from Nascimento. What we saw from Nascimento in that fight was heavy striking, but somewhat wild. We obviously know he's a jiu-jitsu guy, so he wants to get the fight to the ground ASAP and try to implement that BJJ. However, every fight starts on the feet. And in that case, he has to make do with what he has in terms of his striking skills. Again, he throws with a lot of heat, has a solid leg kick as well. But I don't like how wild he is with it. He throws with a lot of heat, like I said, and there is a lot of power behind it. But he does throw a little bit too wild for my liking. Obviously, it's something that needs to be shored up a little bit, and he has, solid training partners to do that with. But the issue here is, I'm still concerned about the level of competition that he fought leading into the UFC. Obviously, he was on the Contenders race and he fought a guy that was 7-0 and Mikhail Martinek. He got an arm triangle choke in that fight, but that was a fight where also Martinek landed a couple good shots on the feet too. What we've seen from Daukaus in his last fight against Parker Porter, who was a guy that came in with a solid striking base, yet we saw Chris Daukaus was the one that was actually getting his punches off properly. He was a lot crisper. I was very surprised to see the striking that he was able to implement in that fight. Very straight shots down the middle, crisp shots, powerful shots too, and quick too. He was landing a couple shots, and they were very, very fast for especially for a heavyweight. So that's something that's a little bit concerning if you're a Rodrigo Nascimento backer. Chris Daukaus is known as a guy that has a lot of good jiu-jitsu, but it's a little bit skeptical in my opinion. I have seen him pull off reversals and have seen him pull off some solid takedowns and solid jiu-jitsu maneuvers, but I've seen other times where he's taken down pretty easily. And that's a little bit of a concern going up against a guy like Nascimento who wants to get the fight to the ground. Going into this, I thought the under 1.5 would probably be a sure bet. However, I could absolutely see a way that this plays out where both guys are just kind of hanging on to each other. You know what I mean? And there is a skepticism in terms of Rodrigo Nascimento's gas tank, as we haven't really seen him, or at least there's not footage available of him going past the first round. Past the second round. Obviously, we saw him go into the second round against Dontel Mays, but we have seen Daukaus later in fights. His fight against Jeff Buckley, that was a back and forth fight, but he was still in there from the first minute to the third minute. He did get taken down a couple times. He did get reversed a couple times, but he was still in it. What is Rodrigo Nascimento's gas tank like? I'm not 100% sure. So I'm not totally thinking that the under 1.5 is a sure bet here. And I'm not really confident on either side, but if you're giving me such a wide line, I would rather go with Chris Daukaus here. Again, sharper hands, solid enough jiu-jitsu. Hopefully he's able to stay out of whatever Nascimento throws his way, and hopefully he can pull off some submissions or reversals as well. But Nascimento's a big dude as well. That's something that you have to keep in mind. Daukaus is 6'3" with a 76-inch reach, and we got 6'2", 80-inch reach for Nascimento. So slight height advantage for Daukaus, but slight reach advantage for Nascimento, and obviously, the leg reach is something that you need to take into consideration as well. But I can't believe I'm actually saying it, but I'm actually leaning Chris Daukaus here. I think his ability to mix his striking, which seems to look like it's getting better on a fight-to-fight basis, and especially what we saw in that Parker Porter fight. I was very impressed with what we saw from his hands. He carries a lot of power in them, is able to sneak in a lot of good shots right down the middle, very tight boxing as well in those situations. And then the wildness of Rodrigo leaves a little bit to be desired. So I'm not sure why people are super, set on Nascimento here. I'm surprised he's as big of a favorite as he is. But with that said, I'm not willing to, part ways with my money for Daukaus to see if he's able to pull off the upset here. But I do believe he's going to be the one that gets the victory. This could be an absolutely sloppy fight too. But if it stays on the feet, I do favor Daukaus a little bit. He could have a little bit more output. And again, he could land the better shots if he's able to just, catch Rodrigo whenever he's throwing those wild shots. So that's something to keep in mind. Again, this is a stay away fight for me, even though over under, I'm not even sure which way I'm going to go there, but I'll go with Chris Daukaus to probably win this fight by second or third round TKO. With that said, again, stay away fight for me. Can't pick either side confidently, but if you are putting a gun to my head and you want me to tell me what side which has value, is probably the Chris Daukaus side. So I'm going with Chris Daukaus to win this fight via second round TKO. KB Bhullar versus Tom Breese. We got minus 260 on Breese and plus 220 on Bhullar. Let's start off with Tom Breese. So we know what has plagued him for the majority of his career. It's been his mental game. You know what I mean? He's managed to pull out a couple of fights pretty much day of, weigh-in day, or even fight week, which is why you see such a lull between his fight between Daniel Kelley and Brendan Allen. He was supposed to fight Cesar Ferreira twice, Alessio De Carico, Ian Heinisch, and then Andy Clamp. Actually, that was a grappling belt. But before he did get step back into the cage with Brendan Allen, he went out there and out-grappled Lee Chadwick and Andy Clamp in grappling exhibitions, and then went into that fight with Brendan Allen and accepted that bottom position a little bit too much, it seemed. Obviously, shout out to Brendan Allen for doing a good job of keeping him there and, staying out of any bad positions. But Allen did find Breese did find himself in a very compromising position up against the cage where it seemed like he could have exploded off the cage to kind of just get out of that bad position, but he just stayed there, and Brendan Allen was able to rain down shots. And we saw, I'm going to chalk it up to Tom Breeze's mental kind of just breaking and giving up at that point. But the kid is talented, man. Let's not forget how good he could actually be if his mental game was there. And I'd say more than half of the attributes that you need when you get into the cage is supposed to be mental. So he needs to really shore that up, because I feel like he could be a huge problem for a lot of guys. So, great striking game. His jiu-jitsu game is getting better, even though we didn't see the best of it this last time around. But I truly believe he has a lot to offer when it comes to the jiu-jitsu realm. He did just grapple actually back in July, so he has tried to stay active as much as possible. And I think that this fight here against KB Bhullar is a perfect one for him to try to get his head back into the game. KB Bhullar coming in as an undefeated 8-0 fighter. I think Tom Breese, again, it comes down to him, being mentally just broken by these fighters before even stepping into the cage. Even if talent for talent, he should go out there and scrub these guys. I think with the unknown of KB Bhullar, there's only a couple fights really out there to really gather the intel that you need on this fighter. But I think how they match up is kind of a good matchup for Tom Breese. Again, there is a lack of tape out there in terms of what we can gather ourselves on KB Bhullar, but what we can actually see and find is that, he does do good at range. He has solid kicks. His jiu-jitsu seems to be on point, has a north-south choke on his record, a couple other Darce chokes finishes on his record as well too. So I'm interested to see how this will play out if it does hit the ground. But I still need to see a little bit more from KB. I'm not totally sold on him yet. There's just not enough data out there for me to actually come to a legitimate decision on whether he's worth an underdog shot here or not. His most impressive victory to date is his victory over Matt Dwyer, which was a 3-round victory. Not a fight that I was able to see though. So he does seem like a lengthy guy, uses his range well, but I think Tom Breese might have the advantage on the feet. My interest is where it's going to be on the ground. There's just too many unknowns in this fight for me to truly make a read here or a bet. Obviously, with the line being as wide as it is, you might just, if you want to bet this fight at all, it's probably the dog in KB. But I'm actually going to go with Breeze here. I think he gets back on track, and it hurts me to say that. As a fellow Punjabi individual, a fellow Sikh, I really want to see Bhullar go out there and prove me wrong. But I need to see more from him before I can make an educated guess, an educated prediction regarding what he can actually bring to the cage. And he could be a live dog as well. For me personally, I'm going to stay away from this fight completely. Like, I don't want my bias of Bhullar being a Punjabi guy for me to be like, okay, I'm going to go out there and bet this guy. But I can't trust Breeze yet either. We need to see him go out there, get a couple victories, get some more confidence under his belt before we can be like, all right, this guy is somebody that you can trust at minus 260 against a UFC newcomer. There's too many questions at this point in time. So I think this is a stay away fight. This is a prime stay away fight, because if Tom Breese is on top of his game, he could look like a top 5 guy. But if he's not there, then he looks like a bottom 5 guy. So I'm not 100% sure what kind of Tom Breese we're going to get, but this will be a good indication to see how much that loss really did to him and how much it mentally actually defeated him, and if it will trickle down to, future performances. So, I'm not parlaying Tom Breese. I'm not even throwing him into a lottery parlay. Neither am I doing that with Bhullar. This is more of a sit back and just see what kind of fighters we're getting with both of these guys. So I will lean with Tom Breese for the experience. hoping that he's mentally on so he can actually perform. My heart is obviously with Bhullar. I hope he pulls it off. We need a legit Indian guy in the UFC making some waves, not name Arjun Bhullar, but KB Bhullar. Hopefully he's able to get it done. Obviously there's no relation there, so don't even try that. But yeah, I do like Breese here. I think he'll get it done on the feet. Probably by decision, just go out there and outstrike KB, have a little bit more output. KB seems to be a little bit too patient on the feet. Not saying that's completely a bad thing, but at the end of the day, if this ends up going a full 3 rounds, you got to believe that Tom Breese is going to be the one with the a little bit more output. And again, it also comes down to who will be able to land the more significant shots on the feet too. A part of me wants to see it play out on the ground as well, just to see where both of their jiu-jitsu games are at. But I'm going to be leaning with Tom Breese here to win this fight via decision. Just slightly outstriking Bhullar here. But again, in terms of betting this fight, I'm staying the fuck away. I just want to sit back, cheer for my guy Bhullar, but we'll see what happens. But in terms of a prediction, I'll go with Breese here with the experience advantage and seemingly striking advantage. So yeah, I'll go with Tom Breese to win this fight via decision. Youssef Zalal versus Ilia Topuria. We got minus 185 on Youssef Zalal and plus 160 on Topuria. Let's start off with Topuria. This is a guy that I've been high on for a long time. Dating back to his fight with Brian Bhullar, that was June of 2018. I recall, for some reason, I just had this, this urge to bet Cage Warriors for some reason. I'm not sure exactly why. Even one championship, I had the time, I wasn't doing full breakdowns for every single card like I am now, but Cage Warriors was one of those, especially in that spot. I remember wanting to bet that fight, and then especially saw the odds. I do want to confirm what the odds were, but I do remember getting him at a solid plus money. So he was plus 100 to Brian Bhullar, and I think I got like plus 120 or something, but solid spot there. One thing, the tape was tough to find on him originally, and especially the tape that we did find on him, we were skeptical in terms of what level of competition he was really going up against, because he's just going in there taking these guys down immediately and then just sinking in submissions or ground and pounding these guys out. He seemed to have a pretty bright future, and then he goes out there and does what he does to Brian Bhullar. Takes him down with relative ease and then chokes him out via dart stroke. His most recent fight against Steven Gonzalez, he got hurt early with that head kick by Gonzalez, but then, Topuria was able to implement his grappling pretty much right away. Went for a dart stroke, wasn't able to get that. Then eventually they found the fight back on its feet, and then he got the one-punch knockout. Beautiful work there. I am still a little bit skeptical in terms of what his stand-up actually looks like. I think we'll see Zalal with a slight striking advantage here, but I think it truly comes down to the bread and butter, which is his grappling. He's just so high level with it. He's a black belt at this point now. I believe he got his black belt just around the Brian Bhullar fight. He's been a high-level black belt for a long time now. He's been trained jiu-jitsu hard, and it shows in his fights. The guy's very, very well-versed on the ground, pretty much a step ahead of his opponents at all points, and has a strong wrestling base as well, too, in terms of being able to get the fight to the ground. Again, I feel like his striking still needs a little bit of work, but luckily enough for him, his grappling is good enough that he's going to be able to get by against some of these guys with just his grappling alone. Youssef Zalal, we kind of know what he's about. He has had a strong start to 2020. He's had 3 victories in the UFC now, and now he's looking for his 4th one. February, June, August, and now October. 4 fights in 2020. Ridiculous stretch right now. 3 straight victories in the UFC. Austin Lingo, Jordan Griffin, and then Pierre Barrett. But if you go back to his fight with Jose Mariscal, that was a fight that he lost, but, you could have made a little bit of a case for Zalal in that fight too. But that was a fight where Mariscal was able to get him down with relative ease. There didn't seem like too much takedown defense in terms of Zalal's side. But he did have good jiu-jitsu. He had decent enough jiu-jitsu to try to stay out of those bad positions. Had a couple of submission attempts as well. Never really got super close to actually finishing them. But that fight showed his takedown defense wasn't the greatest. Even the Jordan Griffin fight, even Peter Barrett, they both got him down with relative ease. It was a different thing in terms of being able to keep him down, but I don't think either of those guys have the level of jiu-jitsu that Ilia Topuria has. So I think that Topuria is definitely live here as a dog, and I think his jiu-jitsu is going to be the main factor here. There are still questions remaining about Topuria, though. You know what I mean? Like there's a striking that I still need to see a little bit more, and his cardio. Most of his fights are done within the first round, 2 rounds. It's kind of like Tom Aspinall thing where we see them go out there and just dust these guys. But what does it look like if they have to go a full 15 minutes? It's going to be tough to go out there and submit Youssef Zalal, who has not been submitted in his pro career yet. Both of his losses have come via decision. But, again, we do find him in compromising situations when fights are taken to the ground. Topuria is just another level of grappling compared to what he's faced in the past, at least in my opinion. I think he has a high ceiling. He has a ton of abilities on the ground that not a lot of people have. He's strong. His wrestling looks on point too. So I think that he should be able to grind out some of these guys. And to be honest, I wanted to go like a 2.5 unit stab here on. That's not even a stab. That's a full shot. A 2.5 unit shot on Topuria here. But those outlying questions still make me a little bit more conservative in terms of how much I want to put on Topuria. I still will be betting him. I think plus 160 is a very favorable spot for him. But again, we do need to see what that cardio looks like. And if, I do think Zalal is going to be hard to put away. But I still believe that we can get a solid 2 rounds of grappling and control from Topuria in this fight to be able to pull away with it. We know what Zalal's game is. The guy likes to stay on the outside. He likes to move a lot. He likes to kick. He likes to strike from the outside, get in and out. But he does still have issues in terms of getting backed up to the cage. And I think that's where Topuria will have success. I love Topuria in the spot. Like I hate to keep harping on it, but I was super excited to see him get signed to the UFC. And this is not just strictly off of the hype that I had on him after that Brian Bhullar fight. I truly believe this guy has a bright future, and his grappling is going to be the essence. It's going to be the centerfold of his success. So I truly think that we'll see him be successful here. I think we'll see him be able to take advantage of positions that we've seen Jordan Griffin and Peter Barrett get on Zalal. I'm hoping that we get a submission finish. I'm going to say second round sub for Topuria. Actually, maybe even first round sub if he gets it down. But the cardio and the striking is my only questions about Ilia still. So I'm looking forward to seeing him answer those questions. Hopefully this goes longer than a round or so we can actually see those questions answered. But I do think he's a solid spot here. I see him getting the takedown with relative ease against Zalal and then implementing his jiu-jitsu. Hopefully his cardio is good enough. That's my only concern. But I will still be making the play on him at plus 160. I think he's a solid spot. And, this is going to halt the run of Youssef Zalal, who a lot of people are really high on. He was supposed to fight Sung Woo Choi before Topuria stepped in, and he was like a minus 400 a favorite. A lot of people are loving him, and he's coming with a lot of juice in a lot of his fights. But I think Ilia Topuria is going to go out there and stop and halt that hype train of Youssef Zalal. So I do like Zalal here to win. I do like Topuria here. I'm going to say by first round sub. The guy's a beast. He is really good on the ground, and I think we'll truly see that here in his UFC debut. So once again, I'm going with Ilia Topuria to win this fight via first round submission. Tom Aspinall versus Alan Baudot. We got minus 485 on Tom Aspinall and plus 385 on the UFC newcomer Alan Baudot. The over-under, obviously under 1.5 is minus 160. And Tom Aspinall to win inside the distance is minus 245. Minus 240, I should say. Insane. Everybody is all over Tom Aspinall. And he opened up as a minus 350 favorite, and it's slowly inching its way down. We're even seeing minus 580 at a couple places. A lot of people showing love to Tom Aspinall. So let's start off with him. He had a successful UFC debut against Jake Collier last time around, or at least the guy that ate Jake Collier. Finished him with the right cross 45 seconds into that first round. Collier just didn't look like he wanted to be there at all. and solid win for Tom Aspinall. It's a good way to stamp your arrival to the UFC. If you guys do remember my breakdown for that fight, I was a little bit skeptical of what we were going to get with Tom Aspinall. Even on the podcast, I actually picked Jake Collier to win. And that was before I saw him on the scales. Once I saw him on the scales, then you guys will notice on that same podcast, I went into the comment section immediately and pinned a comment that said, I take back everything I said about Jake Collier and I'm picking Tom Aspinall to win this fight. And that's exactly what happened 45 seconds into that fight. But, those questions still remain. A 45-second victory over Jake Collier is not going to completely sway me off of, potentially fading Tom Aspinall in the future. The kid looks good. He has solid stand-up, brown belt in jiu-jitsu for as much as I know, probably a black belt by this time. But everything that I saw in his fights earlier led me to believe that there's still more that we need to find out about Tom. All of his fights pretty much have finished inside the first round. Anytime he has seen the second round, he did lose. The Lucas Perobiak fight, that was actually lost via illegal 12-6 elbow. So, he pretty much lost that like John Jones lost to Matt Hamill, if you want to say that. But again, there's no tape on that at least I can find. So I'm not sure how one-sided, if anything, that fight actually was. The Stuart Austin fight, that is a fight that we do have tape on, and we did see the ground game of Tom Aspinall, and I gotta say I wasn't that thrilled with it via him losing heel hook in round 2. But again, that was over 5 years ago, so I'm sure he's got to have made some strides since then. He does train at the same gym as Darren Till, so he has a solid training partner there, and he has a ton of potential that a lot of people think that he still hasn't tapped into. He's 27 years old, so he's that's a pretty much a baby in this heavyweight division. So he has a ton of time to really, get his strengths and fulfill his potential to the maximum amount. Luckily for him, taking this fight against Alan Baudot, it's a tough fight. Sorry, not a tough fight. It's an easy fight. What am I talking about? I was going to say the Sergey Spivak fight was a slightly tougher fight in my opinion, where we probably would have seen Tom Aspinall actually, threatened, or him actually even in a little bit of trouble, or even actually at least face a little bit of adversity. In this fight against Alan Baudot, I think he just has us so outclassed, at least in terms of the ground as well, where if he takes this fight to the ground, I wouldn't be surprised if he finds a submission within that first round. Alan Baudot, for as much as hate as he's getting on the interwebs right now, he has decent stand-up. His striking is where he makes his bread and butter, but the one unfortunate thing is it seems like on the local scene, or at least on the regional scene, when he's fighting these Korean guys and these Japanese guys, they're completely outmatched in terms of the size. Alan Baudot is coming in there much, much bigger than these guys, and these guys are trying to go out there and wrestle him, and he's just ragdolling them all around. Once he actually fights guys that are legitimately, his size, or at least his weight class, he's come up out on the short end. Dulce Lungiambula fucking starches him in the first round. They decide to throw heat for the first 30 seconds, and unfortunately for Alan Baudot, he's the one completely stuff on the ground. He went out. It was pretty bad. In the Todd Stout fight, that's a fight where he did win via disqualification, but it was actually Todd Stout who submitted him in the third round. For those familiar with Todd and his fighting style, he's normally a brawler, a Muay Thai striker, likes to throw bombs, but he's normally the one that's getting grapple fucked or clinch fucked. For some reason in that fight, he decided to go that same route, and he did the exact same thing to Alan Baudot. But whenever they were in open space and Alan Baudot was able to flow a little bit, he was actually landing some good shots. I was surprised at the amount he was actually successful in that open area. So if I'm Tom Aspinall, I don't want to give him that space at all. I don't want to make him or, allow him to gain any type of confidence. I want to go in there. I want to close the distance. I want to drag this guy to the ground and test out his jiu-jitsu, because I don't think that there is much of it at all. Why I say that, there are some compromising positions that he got Todd in, and Todd was able to just completely reverse out of it and have a sweep and then control him pretty heavily on top. Very, very surprised at the ability for Todd to actually do that to a guy, because that's not how Todd fights. You know what I mean? Todd has always been the one that's been grapple fucked. So for him to go out there and grapple fuck somebody else, it kind of just shows me that. And this is no shot at Todd. You know what I mean? The guy's my boy, so I'm not trying to shit on him at all. But Baldo had no answer for the grappling, and that's a little bit concerning, especially going in there against a, possible black belt. I believe Tom Aspinall is at this point in time. He was a brown belt 5 years ago, so I'm assuming he's a black belt by this time. I think he's going to be in a ton of trouble. I think we'll see Tom Aspinall get this fight to the ground ASAP. Try not to incur any damage or lose via fluke finish of any kind. But I'm expecting him to get this fight to the ground pretty much ASAP, work his ground and pound, hopefully opens up a submission of some sort. But I do think we see Tom Aspinall go out there and get a submission in the first round. But he needs to be careful on the feet. A lot of people can bang on Allen all they want, but I was impressed with what I did see from him on the feet in some of the fights that I was able to find of his. Again, even rocking and hurting Todd to a certain extent, that was kind of mind-opening or mind-boggling to me. I'm not saying it's a complete wipeout for Tom Aspinall on the feet, but I do think his best path to victory is getting this fight to the ground. So I'm going to go with Tom Aspinall to win this via first-round submission. But yeah, he's a little bit out of my betting range or even parlaying range now. You're getting close to minus 500 for this guy. And, this is heavyweight MMA, and Alan Baldo has shown enough, enough on the feet for me to believe that this guy has even a puncher's chance at this point in time. So minus 500, I'm going to pass on Tom Aspinall, but if some money does find its way back on Alan Baldo, closer to fight time, maybe I'll look at parlaying Tom closer to the minus 400 range. But I'm going to pass on this fight in the under 1.5, minus 160. Not a bad spot either, as I do believe if Allen does get it done, it's an early finish, or if Tom Aspinall gets it done, which I believe he will, it's going to be in the first round regardless. So I got Tom Aspinall via first round submission. Marcus Perez versus Dricus du Plessis. We got plus 135 on Perez and minus 155 on du Plessis. Let's start off with Marcus Perez. He's coming off a loss to Wellington Turman. He was actually scheduled to fight Eric Spicely August 1st. Spicely fails to make weight, and they pull that fight. And unfortunately for Perez, they're not able to get him short notice a replacement. So it's coming up close to a year since the last time he fought, which was against Wellington Turman, where he lost a decision. His only wins in the UFC have come over James Boknovich, who we quickly found out was not UFC level at all. And then Anthony Hernandez in a fight where he lost the first round, clips Anthony Hernandez with something in the second round, pours it on him, and then eventually gets an anaconda choke finish. But outside of that, he lost to Eric Anders, lost to Andrew Sanchez. He did beat Ian Heinisch in the LFA scene with an arm triangle choke, so that was quite impressive. But outside of that, man, it's a little bit sketchy with Perez. The guy really doesn't fight with much urgency. He fights to entertain. You know what I mean? He doesn't really fight to win. There's a difference between fighting to entertain and fight to win. Fighting to entertain, you're just going out there and throwing fucking spinning shit. You're coming out in a weird karate stance and throwing shots here and there. And, one might land, but for the majority, you're pretty much missing the target. And then fighting to win, you have... that's where I think we'll see du Plessis. Like, you'll have a game plan in mind where you're going to be patient, you're going to wait for your openings, and then you're going to attack. It doesn't seem like that is comprehended in Marcus Perez's mind. Like, the guy just goes out there and just fucking no game plan, just throws it out the window and just does whatever the hell he wants. And it's hard to trust a guy like that. The one thing that you can trust him with, though, is his durability. The guy can take a shot. He's never been finished. There's a ton of like, if he really put it together, I think he could be actually a good fighter. Like, he has some power, he has some solid submission skills, but outside of that, it's just a wild card whenever you're betting on a fight with Marcus Perez. Dricus du Plessis is a guy that I've heard a lot about, especially after he beat Roberto Soldic, who's a monster on that KSW scene. Du Plessis comes in there after capturing a second title in EFC. He knocked out Yannick Bahati to be able to get a middleweight title. So he was the welterweight champion and the middleweight champion. Then he hops over to KSW, challenges for the welterweight title pretty much immediately, and then knocks out Roberto Soldic. So that was very impressive on his end. And then Soldic gets pretty much an immediate rematch. Just being, the long-reigning KSW welterweight champ at that time, and then Soldic gets to finish in the third round. So, since then, Duplessis has pulled off 2 straight victories, one over Joelton Santos, and then another one over Brendan Lesser. Both of those finishes, he looks good. Like the thing is, I thought I would be a little bit more blown away by him, given the amount that I've actually heard about this guy. He seems slightly low output, waits for his spots, picks guys apart, has some solid striking, decent wrestling, nothing crazy that jumps off the page, but I think he's efficient enough of a fighter overall to go out there and just pick apart Marcus Perez. I don't think he's going to go out there and finish Perez, even though most of his wins have come by finish. I think it's going to be a little bit harder to put away Marcus Perez. The guy's durable, like I said. You know what I mean? So I think Duplessis really needs to understand that. I hope he doesn't go into this fight thinking that he's going to go out there and knock out Perez or submit Perez right away. It's not going to happen. He's going to have to be methodical, technical about it. And from what I've seen, it seems like that's the type of fighter he is. He doesn't really throw without being calculated and in terms of what's coming back his way, which is why he's on such a great run. Outside of that Soldic fight, his only other loss was Gareth McLennan way back in 2014, which was his 5th ever fight. And that was McLennan's 13th or 14th fight at the time. And that was the fight that actually got McLennan into the UFC. And then obviously McLennan just went on a shit streak and got cut. But, Duplessis really learned from that fight, it seems like, and he came back looking like a monster. And with Roberto Soldic as his only loss in that amount of time, not to mention a victory over him too, that's got to do a lot for his confidence. So as long as he doesn't go out there and just fight like a complete idiot, he should be able to go out there, leg kick Marcus Perez, land a couple 1-2s, wait for his openings, wait for Perez to overextend a little bit, land a couple shots, maybe clinch fuck him a little bit, get into the grappling a little bit too. As long as he mixes it up, doesn't blow his gas tank early or anything like that, I think this is an easy decision victory for Duplessis. But I just need to see a little bit of output from him, a little bit of, calculated approach, and I think it should be easy victory for him. The one bet that I'm actually looking at for this fight is for the fight to start round 3. The over-under is set at 2.5, with the over 2.5 being plus 105. For the fight to start round 3 is minus 125. I think there's some solid value there given the durability of Marcus Perez. And a part of me just is a little bit skeptical of giving them that extra 2.5 minutes and betting the over instead. You know what I mean? Minus 125 is a great line in my opinion. For Perez, who's super durable, Duplessis, who seems to be calm, calculated, and really looks for his openings. He has a plethora of first-round finishes on his record too, but the guy, when he's actually fighting somebody that isn't a complete nutcase, he's very calm and collected, just like the Soldic fights. So, I think we see Duplessis take this fight via decision, but I think the play here will be the fight to start round 3. So if you have that prop available on any of your bookies, I think it's definitely worth a shot. So I'll go with Duplessis to win this fight via decision. Big Ben Rothwell versus Marcin Tybura. We got minus 160 on Big Ben and plus 140 on Marcin Tybura. And this is a line similar to the Corey Sandhagen line that's slowly starting to close as we're getting closer to fight day. So we had Ben Rothwell close to minus 200 at one point as early as last Friday. And now he's inching closer to that minus 160 range, even minus 155 at certain spots. I'm very intrigued to see where this line is going to close because I think that the money is coming in on the wrong side, just as the Corey Sandhagen fight, as I'm going to allude to later in this podcast. But let's start off with Marcin Tybura. He's coming off of 2 straight victories. That may lead people to believe that he's on a little bit of a resurgence. He has a victory over Sergey Spivak and Maxim Grishin. Before that, he was on a 2-fight losing streak to Shamil Abdurakhimov and Augusto Sakai. Both of those fights he got finished in. And then obviously he had lost to Derek Lewis prior to that via finish as well. But, some people think that he's got a little bit of a resurgence, managed to get his ducks in a row, and is finally fighting to the potential that a lot of people believed he could have. But I don't really believe so. Because if you look at those fights stylistically and how he matches up to Ben Rothwell, trying to implement a similar style, it's just not going to work. So let's go to the Sergey Spivak fight. That's a fight where he used his hands a little bit, but the main thing for him was try to get this fight to the ground. And there wasn't much opposition in terms of Spivak and his takedown defense. He was able to get that takedown pretty easily in every single round and ride out on top, landing perfect shots from on top and, just taking a decision that way. The Maxime Grishin fight, kind of the same thing, but it was a little bit more clinching up against the cage, overpowering Grishin. If you guys are aware of Maxime Grishin, he's more of a light heavyweight. He took that fight on short notice, and he's mainly a 205er. He came in at 224, whereas Marcin Tybura came in the 250s, mid 250 range. So he had a ton of weight to work with, and he was able to pretty much just control Grishin that entire fight. Not too much in the hands, not too much in the feet, just a couple combinations here and there. With Ben Rothwell, though, let's look at his last little spurt. He's on a 2-fight winning streak as well, and the same thing that he shares in common with Marcin Tybura in regards to the last fight was that they both fought light heavyweights and they both went out there and got a victory. Both of them on 2-fight winning streaks. But Ben Rothwell has looked a little bit sketchy as of late too. That's why going into taping this fight, I'm like, all right, there's got to be some value on Marcin Tybura here, even at plus 140. Like, you got to go in there and think that he has more tools and more ways to win this fight. But when you actually break it down and look at it, the ways that Junior Dos Santos, Blagoy Ivanov, and Andrei Arlovsky won their fights against Ben Rothwell, and even Stefan Struve, who was arguably winning that fight up until he got finished and got nutshotted a couple times, is the output. It's what's coming back at Ben Rothwell, because a given in all of Ben Rothwell's fights is that he's going to be the one pushing the pace, not pushing the pace, but walking forward. He's going to be the one kind of pushing his opponents up against the cage, walking them down, looking for that kill shot. And he does blitz in every now and then with a couple awkward strikes. His strikes come from such weird angles and the types of ranges that he uses is just so awkward for some opponents. And then obviously he has a lot of power behind his shots as well. So that's something that Tybura is going to need to figure out. But like Arlovsky, JDS especially, and Blagoy Ivanov to a certain extent, all of those fighters, as they were backing up, they were the ones, stepping forward a little bit, landing a combination. The important thing here is the combination. They're landing 2-3 strikes and then getting out of the way. A lot of them were doing a lot of body work on Ben Rothwell as well too, because he does have a decent guard where he's just like, he has this weird style of just kind of like batting people down, but they land on the body and then they open up the head. And then we saw Andrei Arlovsky paint a beautiful picture, a beautiful violent picture on Ben Rothwell's face with the beautiful handiwork that he was able to land in that fight. That's what's concerning about Tybura. Tybura doesn't throw that type of efficiency with his combinations. He doesn't throw many combinations to begin with. He's more of a one and done type of fighter as well too. He moves well for a heavyweight, but his lack of output is kind of what's concerning here. And also, I think that he's going to be very intimidated in terms of the power that's going to be coming back in him from Ben Rothwell here. Anytime that opponents have really pushed Marcin Tybura and were the ones walking forward, they were quite successful in terms of landing a big enough shot to plant him on his butt and get the finish. I think Ben Rothwell, it's been a while since, other than the Stefan Struve fight, the last time he finished a fight via strikes was Alistair Overeem back in 2014. But I think this is another prime opportunity for Ben Rothwell to go in there, push the pace, keep walking him down, and then eventually landing a big enough shot to put Tybura down. If Tybura wants to go in there and try to take Ben Rothwell down, I think he's going to be very unsuccessful. There's not a lot of guys that have been successful in taking Ben Rothwell down. And when they are, he gets right back to his feet. I highly doubt that Tybura is going to be able to keep Rothwell down. It's almost going to look like when he was taking down Derek Lewis. Yeah, he got Derek Lewis down, but he wasn't able to keep him down. You know what I mean? When Derek Lewis wanted to get back to his feet, he was able to get back to his feet. And I think that's kind of a Derek Lewis thing, but I think Ben Rothwell will be capable of that in this fight as well. But I don't even see it hitting the ground. I think if they do tie up in the clinch against the cage, I think it's Ben Rothwell that's going to be a little bit more, a little bit stronger, have a little bit more brute strength to actually push Tybura up against the cage, land a couple baby shots, and then break off and then start to strike again. It's the killer instinct of Ben Rothwell as well too. I think that's really going to catch up to Tybura. So going into this, I really wanted to bet Tybura. I'm like, okay, he seems like the more agile fighter, the one that has a little bit more tools on the feet, but it's his lack of output that really has me concerned. And I think that Ben Rothwell continuously walking him down is going to break his will. Rothwell is going to be the one getting his shots off, and I truly think that we'll see Ben Rothwell get a finish here too. So I'm going to say either first or second round KO for Rothwell here. Plus 270 for him to win inside the distance is not that bad of a line. But I do like Ben Rothwell here. He's currently at minus 160. I want to see how much this line continues to drop, because if it gets to the minus 140, minus 130 range even, I might be tempted to take a little bit of a shot. But maybe he's a nice little parlay piece as well. If you guys have noticed from my last couple of events, something that I like to do is take a fighter that's just outside of the range of me wanting to bet him straight, like a Loma Lukbumi, who is at minus 150, I believe, and then parlay them with something that I believe it's a little bit more of a sure bet. And just get some plus money out of it rather than just taking Ben Rothwell straight. So Rothwell definitely is a spot that I'm going to be looking at, and there are a ton of other potential parlay pieces on this card. So if I haven't already spoken about it on this podcast, you guys know what the fuck I'm talking about. But yeah, I do like Ben Rothwell here. I think he gets it done in the second round, and I think the pressure is just going to be too much for Tybura. He won't have enough coming back at Ben Rothwell, and I think that's going to be his detriment, because that's really what seems to demoralize Ben Rothwell in his fights, is when guys are able to get off on the feet, land combinations, and get out of the way. I don't think Tybura will be capable of that, or at least capable of sustaining that over 15 minutes. I think it's in the second round that he breaks, and we get a Ben Rothwell TKO. Makwan Amirkhani versus Edson Barboza. We got minus 260 for Barboza and plus 220 from Mr. Finland. Let's start off with Mr. Finland himself. So he's coming off a victory over Danny Henry over at UFC 251, which was the first fight, I believe, at Fight Island. And he came out on the successful end with an anaconda choke 3 minutes and 15 seconds into that first round. It was a little bit of a feeling out process for the first 3 or so minutes. Danny Henry was really trying to establish his range and try to find the right spots to pick apart Makwan Amirkhani. And then all it took was a flying knee attempt for Makwan to really get Danny Henry into a position to push him up against the cage, go for a takedown. And Makwan, there's one thing that he does very, very well in most of his takedown attempts is whenever his opponent tries to get out of it, he does a good job of switching one of his arms over to start threatening with the guillotine, and he pretty much starts pulling for an arm and guillotine pretty much immediately. And then his end goal is obviously to slip it all the way to a Darce choke or an anaconda choke, whichever side he has the lock on, of course, and then he tries to finish it that way. If he's not able to get that finish, though, he exerts a lot of energy trying to get that, and that's kind of where his downfall is. He's almost like I hate to call it, but he's almost like a first round finish fighter type of thing. I mean, if he doesn't get the finish in that first round, things are going to get a little bit dicey for him, especially in this fight against Edson Barboza, who, in my opinion, has a significant advantage on the feet. Obviously, just as Shane Burgos had a significant advantage on the feet, as long as they're able to survive that first little onslaught from Makwan Amirkhani with the takedowns and the potential submission threats, I think that it's pretty much a runaway for Barboza. You know what I mean? One thing that Shane Burgos was really successful with and really drained the energy of Makwan was the body shots. And if we watch the Dan Ige fight for Edson Barboza, that's something that's very evident that he, relies on, and he throws it out there a lot. And he even hurts Ige near the ending of that round, of round 2, with a beautiful knee to the body. and a lot of two of the judges actually ended up giving that round to Dan Ige. Yeah, Ige started off that round pretty well, and I think on first watch for our deciding splits we did score for Ige because of his output in the first half of that second round. But Edson Barboza really did start to put it on him in that second round, in the second half of that second round, I should say. But one thing you can always kind of bank on Barboza for is a solid gas tank through 15 minutes, at least better than what Makwan Americani has shown. If Barboza is able to go to work early on that body, I think he'll be able to really gas him out by the end of that first round. And then in the second and third, we'll really see him take over. Barboza, solid takedown defense. Ige did get him down near the ending of that third round. But I don't expect Makwan to really have that much gas to be able to pull off a takedown on Barboza at that point in time. But Barboza, we already know about his style. Great kicks, great Muay Thai, great in the clinch as well. And that's where Makwan really finds himself as well, is in these clinch type of situations, trying to drag his opponents down. But once he's eating knees and elbows from the inside from Edson Barboza, I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult for him to really complete those takedowns and really want to, engage in those scenarios even more. So I think that's a little bit of an issue for Makwan. I truly think that Edson Barboza still has the ability to compete at a high level. We did see something about him saying that he wanted to get released from the UFC, and I think it has in part to do with his, the level of pay that he's getting, because look at that. His last two fights, split decisions. If they don't, if one other judge gives it to him, he's going home with double his money compared to like contracts with Bellator or PFL or One Championship, whoever the fuck else. Most of these other companies are paying these guys a flat base rate to show up. So if, Barboza's going out there expecting to get paid $84,000 off of a 42 and 42 fight purse, one judge decides that he's not the one that won that fight, and he goes home with half of his money. You know what I mean? So I understand his frustration of fighting with the UFC and probably not getting paid the amount he wants. And obviously it needs to come down to him actually performing and earning those dollars. But at the end of the day, when there's such close fights, and even fights that a lot of judges and a lot of people on MMA decisions actually scored for him too, I can understand the outrage. I understand it. So I get that. So maybe here we see a little bit more of a fire out of him. Maybe we see him a little bit more urgent to, and I think this is a perfect matchup for him to showcase as well too. As long as he's able to survive that first blitz that Makwan Americani is going to be throwing at him in that first round, I think it should be okay. And that's really all I give Makwan. I think that Barboza does such a good job of staying off the cage, cage-wise being very aware of where he's at. If he feels like he's behind the warning track, he does a good job of circling off, getting back to the middle of the cage, and then getting his Muay Thai going once again. I truly think it's going to be the body shots that are the difference maker in this fight. I think once Makwan starts huffing and puffing a little bit, we'll see Edson Barboza really start to throw those kicks to the body more. His switch kick is fucking phenomenal. It's so fast. I highly doubt we'll see Makwan be able to translate a takedown off of a leg kick of Edson Barboza. It would be very surprising to me if he's actually successful in getting Barboza down off of one of those. But I truly think that we see Barboza put on a clinic on the feet after the 3-minute mark or 4-minute mark. Or once Makwan really starts to start huffing and puffing, I think that's where we see Barboza really start to take over. So I wouldn't even, I wouldn't rule out a third round finish for Barboza here. It seems like the odds are plus 800 for Barboza to win in the third. Not enough for me. I mean, I'm looking for those plus 1400s, plus 1500s, but I think there is a solid chance that we see Barboza get Makwan out of there in the third round. But I love Barboza in the spot. He's totally deserving of the juice that he's at right now, minus 250, minus 260. I'm going to see where the money goes a little bit during this week, but and also where my studies take me for the rest of this card. But I truly like Barboza here. I think he's a solid spot. Whether you guys want to parlay him or even play him straight, I think he has a ton of value here, because strictly due to Makwan having a small area to win this fight. Mix that in with the solid takedown defense of Edson Barboza and the wide margin of striking advantage that Barboza has as well. This is Barboza's fight. I think he still has it, and I think he gets it done. I'm going to take Edson Barboza to win this fight via third round TKO. Magic Marlon Moraes versus Corey Sandhagen. We got minus 135 on Corey and plus 115 on Magic Moraes. And the line has actually been trending downwards as the week, or trending to a closer. The gap is closing, pretty much is what I'm fucking trying to say. As the week has gone on, like if you look back at Wednesday of last week, it was minus 170 for Corey Sandhagen, and now we're talking about Monday night of fight week, and it's minus 135. I'm super intrigued to see how this line continues to shift, and I'm kind of surprised, and I'm really looking forward to seeing and hearing from other people what their kind of what their or their how they're getting to this result of Marlon Moraes actually being the good side here. Say what you want about the line value and all that type of stuff. Maybe Marlon Moraes all the way up at, what was he at, plus 150. Okay, that might be a little bit wide. Sure, I get it. But Corey Sandhagen is winning this fight. So let's get into the breakdown of the actual fight itself. Let's start off with Marlon Moraes. And it's weird what they're doing to Marlon Moraes himself, too. So if you guys remember, his last fight was actually UFC 245, where he beat Jose Aldo via split decision. Highly outraged the community. I believe we did a deciding splits on that. We actually thought Moraes won. We believe it came down to that third round. And even though Jose Aldo was the one plotting for it the entire time, and landed a couple of shots, Marlon Moraes was the one that was landing better shots off of his back foot. And then they actually scheduled him to fight Petr Yan in June before COVID, and then COVID hit, and then we saw Petr Yan go out there and fight Jose Aldo and capture the title. And now they got him against Corey Sandhagen, who just lost to the guy that's probably going to be fighting for the title next. But it's weird though, right? Like Marlon Moraes beat Aljamain Sterling. Marlon Moraes beat Jose Aldo. Yet those two guys are the ones getting the shots right before Marlon Moraes. I get that his loss to Henry Cejudo was, somewhat dominant of a victory for Henry Cejudo, but just based on wins, Marlon Moraes should be ahead of these other guys. But in here he steps against Corey Sandhagen now, and he has to prove himself once again. Now, if he goes out there and gets a spectacular victory, I get it. You can put him into a title shot now after Aljamain Sterling gets a shot. And the funny thing is they haven't even made the Yan and Aljo fight official yet. So who knows? Maybe Marlon Moraes goes out there, gets a spectacular win, and they just plug him in because for some reason they just hate Aljamain Sterling. But yeah, in terms of his fighting style, so he came over from the WSOF with a solid record. What was his record coming into the UFC? He was 17-4-1. Most of his losses had happened earlier in his career, but when he, 2 fights before he joined the WSOF, he went on a, 6-9, almost a 16-fight win streak. Insane. He was able to put together, 13 or 14 fight win streak. I'm just getting my math all fucked up. But very, very impressive run that he was on before coming over to the UFC. But then he comes into UFC, loses a split decision against Rafael Assunção, wins 4 straight, including, avenging that loss to Rafael Assunção by dominant finish. 3 finishes in that run as well over Aljamain Sterling, Jimmy Rivera, and then Rafael Assunção. And then he goes out there and beats John Dodson via split decision, and then he gets that title shot against Henry Cejudo and loses in that third round. The first round and a half, he looked good, landing good leg kicks. He was the one moving forward. He was the one throwing his combinations, and Henry Cejudo was a little bit flabbergasted in terms of what was coming towards him. And then something changed halfway through that second round, where Henry Cejudo just decided to say, fuck it, and he was the one that started to move forward, started to throw bombs, started to clinch up, and started landing beautiful knees that really started to suck the wind out of Marlon Moraes. And that's where we see the flaws in Marlon Moraes' game. He doesn't like to be the guy that's backed up. And yeah, you can say that he won that Jose Aldo fight pretty much backing up. But Jose Aldo, he was so wound up and so tense. And yeah, he was the one moving forward. And yeah, he threw a couple good combinations. But his output, the lack of output that he threw, really lost him that fight. If he threw a little bit more, I think he would have come out on the winning end. But the thing is with him, and the difference between Aldo and Corey Sandhagen is Sandhagen's a little bit more loose, a little bit more willing to get in and out of range, pulling shots out of his opponents and then countering them and then getting out of the way. His footwork, and it's kind of hard to say this, especially against a guy like Jose Aldo, but Corey Sandhagen's footwork is much better than Jose Aldo's at this point in their careers. Sandhagen has just such a weird, awkward style. The only guy it really reminds me of is Dominic Cruz, and I think he has a better game than Dominic Cruz too. Once it's going to be all said and done, because he has so much more to his game than that just weird herky jerky, in and out style of Dominic Cruz. Corey Sandhagen throws way more kicks. He attacks that lead leg with it's like a teep to the shin. Just his front kicks up the middle. We didn't see that many kicks out of Dominic Cruz during his reign. He was more of a, in and out, pop you and then get out. Corey Sandhagen, he's a little bit more offensive. I mean, he throws way more output. And that's where I think most of these fighters are going to come to a point where they're just like, fuck, I don't know what to do or how to capitalize in fighting this guy. Aljamain Sterling had a great game plan in terms of just trying to get this fight down, use his strength ASAP, and then get that back. He was able to get that back as soon as he could, and then was able to get to work. If that fight was in the second round or something, I don't think it would have been as easy for Aljamain Sterling to get that submission. And yeah, Marlon Moraes is a high-level black belt himself too, but I don't think he has the level of jiu-jitsu that Aljamain Sterling does, especially offensively. And I think he might even be a little bit too scared to try to go that route too, because if he's not able to pull off that submission early in the fight, he's probably going to gas himself out. One thing that we have seen is he does have an issue with his gas tank, especially when he's not the one in control. Coming into the UFC, I thought, okay, look at this guy having a fantastic run over there in the WSOF, but most of his fights haven't really gone past the third round. He did finish Shaman Moraes in that third round. He won a victory or a decision over Josh Hill, but we know the discrepancy in terms of the striking advantage that Marlon Moraes had in that, and obviously Marlon Moraes was the one with his foot on the pedal in that fight. In this fight against Corey Sandhagen, all I can see is Marlon Moraes continuously moving backwards and getting popped in the face and having that just disturbed look on his face, like I don't know what the fuck to do or where these punches are coming from or what Corey Sandhagen is going to throw next. I think Marlon Moraes really only has one round to win this fight. If he doesn't get it done in that first round, I think it's going to be very hard for him to catch Corey Sandhagen in second, third, fourth, or fifth round. He has a great switch kick. He landed on Aldo pretty much the first strike that he threw against Aldo. It was the first strike he threw against Jimmy Rivera, and he was able to put him out. But I don't think we'll see Corey Sandhagen get caught with anything like that. Sandhagen uses his range and his reach very, very well. It's not often that you see him get hit with a really big shot. I think the most... I think the punch or the exchange that sticks out most in terms of Corey Sandhagen being the most in trouble was when John Lineker really put it on him in that last 30 seconds of their fight, landed a good combination, and then it forced Sandhagen to go for a shot, and he ended up in a guillotine. And, it seemed like Sandhagen was going to get out regardless, but it did take them to the end of the fight, and Sandhagen was still able to come out with the victory there. But I like Sandhagen. I don't think that one loss to Aljamain Sterling is too detrimental to his career. The kid has a lot to still grow and a lot more potential to really achieve still. But I think at this point in his career, he's still at that point where he can beat a monster like Marlon Moraes. It's going to come down to Moraes getting a finish here. And if you truly believe that Marlon Moraes is going to get the win here, you might as well bet him inside the distance. There's no way he's going to win a decision here against Corey Sandhagen, who, in my opinion, has the better gas tank for a 25-minute fight. Even though this is going to be his first scheduled main event for the UFC, I truly believe the work that he's getting over there in Colorado at altitude, his game plan and his style, and how we've seen him fight over the runs of fights that he's had in the UFC, you can see that this guy has gas tank for days. And it's going to really, really stump Marlon Moraes, in my opinion. I don't think we've seen too much chin issues from Corey Sandhagen either. So again, I don't think that the knockout is truly much of a threat on Marlon Moraes' side. And don't get me wrong, Moraes has a ton of power. So that could definitely change things. He could definitely add that little wrinkle that other fighters weren't able to. But he was able to take shots from Lineker outside of that one exchange at the end of the fight. But I don't even think we'll see Marlon Moraes really hanging with Corey Sandhagen when it comes to the 14th and 15th minute of the fight. The one line that I really like here as well, and it's still a little bit early, but the fight doesn't go to decision at minus 195 is very intriguing. Corey Sandhagen to win inside the distance at plus 170, very intriguing. I don't think that this will go to a decision. I think we'll either get an early finish for Marlon Moraes or a third or fourth round finish for Corey Sandhagen. I kind of was hoping that the over-under was going to be set at 4.5. Unfortunately, it's at 3.5, and that gives me a little bit of pause. Corey Sandhagen is efficient, and he's and he's very good with staying and sticking to the game plan. Even Elliot Marshall says in one of the interviews that he had in terms of does Corey Sandhagen really search and look for finishes? He doesn't. He just takes what's given to him, and I think he's going to take what's given to him with Marlon Moraes. I just don't know at what point he's going to be able to achieve that with him, whether it's the third round, whether it's the fourth round, whether it's the fifth round. But if you're giving me better than minus 230, minus 240 for this fight to not go to decision, I'm probably pulling the trigger. And I'm pulling the trigger large here because I really think that this is a fight that won't see the judges' scorecards. You're giving me 5 rounds for a guy that's, who's seen to gas with Marlon Moraes, especially when he's put up against pressure. And we're talking about Mr. Pressure himself, Corey Sandhagen, who's just going to be sticking a jab in his face pretty much for the full 20-something minutes, however long this fight's going to go on. From minute 1, Corey Sandhagen is going to be jabbing his face off. He's going to be in and out. He's going to get out of the way of the big strikes of Marlon Moraes. And yeah, I think this is a prime spot for Corey Sandhagen to really break out and really erase that Aljamain Sterling loss off of his record. So I like Corey here. I think he gets it done probably in the 4th round, maybe even the 3rd round. I hope he starts to put a little bit more sting on his shots later in the fight just to, cement a victory here. And I truly think that he is aware of how dominant a finish of Marlon Moraes will look on his record. And I truly think that he's going to go for that finish. So I like Corey Sandhagen here. 4th round TKO. And yeah, I like the fight doesn't go to decision either. The under 3.5, again, I wish it was 4.5 because I'd be a little bit more happy with that. But I'm not sure if the finish is going to come in the 3rd, 4th, or 5th round. But it will be late for Corey Sandhagen. He's going to get it done. He's going to style on Marlon Moraes as well. And I'm hoping that this line continues to come down a little bit because I might just pull Corey Sandhagen straight as well. But I do think the main play for me here will be the fight doesn't go to decision. So once again, Corey Sandhagen to win this fight via 4th round TKO. And those are the breakdowns for UFC Fight Island 5. I hope you guys found those insightful and helps you make a decision on which side you want to lean on for some of these fights. I already have 3 bets in play as of this recording. I am looking to make at least 2, maybe 3 more plays. Not 100% sure yet. It is Wednesday night, so there are still a couple days for me to really see how the line moving settles out for some of these fights. So just stay posted. Patreon members already know what the bets are. I'll release the bets for free once the weigh-ins have completed. Line obviously may not be the same, but I do want to give a little bit of a benefit to the Patreon members for hopping on there so they get the bets as soon as I place them, and probably better lines. Sometimes, worse lines. Who the hell knows with some of these line movements that we've been seeing lately. But yeah, shout out to everybody on the Patreon once again. Hit up the Patreon, $5 a month. You guys get a ton of good content, and you guys help me get this closer to being a full-time thing for me, which I believe would be very beneficial for a lot of people. All right, that's it for this episode. The Patreon link is in the description below. Make sure you guys check that shit out. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. Getting close to that 1,100 subscriber mark. Really looking forward to that. And yeah, we're inching closer to episode 100, which should be for UFC 254. And I have a huge surprise for you guys. I can't wait to get into that episode and start recording that shit for you guys. So very much looking forward to that. But we're still like 3 episodes away. So strap in. All right. Good luck with your bets this weekend. And I'll see you guys next week.